Arced across its crown is Wappling Street, is Shooter's Hill Road, the old Dover Road, along which channel the transforming energies leak in, foam downhill to engulf the capital. Julius Caesar's brief exploratory sortie during 55 BC had its first sight of the new principality from here, as did Agricola's more serious invasion force that followed later by almost a century. The same hushed apprehension of a vast and brilliant counterpane below, untidily tucked under at the far horizon, messy and unmade. The river's copper ribbons spooled across it, crumpling towards the east and settlements like biscuit crumbs. The three great woods, Jack, Castle, Oxley's, rolling up the hill in black iron wave fronts, smashing in a pale green spray across the peak and into Kent. Briefly, amongst its breathless fluid tumble of alarming images, the hill hallucinates a filigree of Roman ideology. A loosely outlined golden threadwork stitched half-heartedly into the landscape's quilt, immediately unpicked, unravelled in a pungent, woolly tangle of New Saxon place names: Eltham, Charlton, Plumstead, Woolwich, Welling, Shetter's Hill. The road becomes a drover's track, an overloaded artery to pump the meat and money up. The massive herds a grubby, lousy scarf wound out along its length. The gas-fat crowbait fallen into wayside ditches blurs to grease and blowflies, melts into the rock dream's rush and flicker, the frenetic lantern show erupting in chalk scribbles, boiling clay out of a subterrene unconscious, flash frames in the blacked-out skull theatre of a buried Bronze Age god. Jet coral, London is accumulated, squirms and grows in the detached gaze of the vantage. Royal successions in a strove of earning. On the Caltrack, swarming spectres crackle into being and as soon are vanished, blazing specks and filaments scratched white upon the film's emulsion. Out a Maying with one of his Catherines, Henry VIII attends a Robin Hood fair, Shooter's Hill as medieval theme park, and meets players dressed as Robin, Friar Tuck, Will Scarlet, Bashful, Goofy. Soon thereafter, Anne of Cleves crosses the hill and is immediately sent packing back the same way, failing to live up to the Hans Holbein PR package that preceded her. Archery ranges smeared across the lower slopes towards the east provide the shooters who will either give the hill its name or else will lend that name a spurious justification, and the 16th century whistles by, a rattling sideways rain of arrows. At the ragged edges of Elizabethan London's proto-psychedelic swoon, murderers blossom on the steep road's wooded margins. Springing up around the base of the Armada beacon raised in 1588, cut purses ripening to cut throats, claret splashed across the turnpike and, inevitably, a new nickname: Hill of Blood. A missing psychotronic flick from Herschel Gordon Lewis, William Castle. Agent Orange options are employed to thin the bandit cover. Come the 1600s and the shearing of the hill commences, north side gradually reduced to roundhead stubble. Come the 18th century and building starts, the place's fever visions crystallised to lines and corners, brick growth thrusting through the shaven scalp, the coronet materialising one point at a time. First inns arrive, providing watering holes for drovers, bolt holes for the highwaymen, and holes in general. Fanny on the hill, the Catherine wheel, sun in the sands, and then, in 1749, the crowning glory of the Bull, palatial edifice erected on the summit with its glittering pleasure gardens, with its wells and fields and stables, its star chefs and its extensive cellars. Sumptuous hostelries and godlike view now make the dreaming hill itself a focal point for human aspirations, human dreams, as inns are followed by the follies, haunts and halls of hoobry-sozzled toffs groping towards Olympus. Princess Charlotte dwells at Shrewsbury House, face underlit a ghostly scarab green by bubbling glass retorts, a first stab at extracting gas from coal. A little further down the hillside to the east, in the still wooded reaches south of Wappling Street, the widow of Sir William James raises a single turret castle, 7-room, in 1784, commemorating her late husband's naval victory over the pirate chieftain Conaghy Angria at his Malabar coast seafort 30 years before. The tower looms up to peer between the treetops at the city spread below. Brass sight lines set into its wooden crow's nest rail, aligned with distant London monuments, with neighbouring counties, watching for the brigand hordes that may one day seethe from the backed-up drain of the metropolis, engulf the hill in rum, bum, concertina, cheap accessories. Just up the road, the Ligbird family are owners of the land on which the bull is standing, with their stately pile Broom Hall next door and on the right, while at the hill's foot by the gallows and the gibbet fields are former Neolithic camps accumulating mass and muscle, the Royal Arsenal and Royal Artillery in Woolwich from the kick-off of the 18th century. Burned powder notes perfume the nagging westerly, spark flintlock images of plunder, war and revolution in the free associating stone subconscious, in its perilous delirious mix. Always a touchstone of imaginings and point of moonrise for the ancient settlements, their dead kings hulking from its turf, the heap attracts new fictions now. Already a collage of other men's exploits and novelists' inventions, the Dick Turpin story is attached to Shooter's Hill, the Essex boy misplaced in a confusion over rumoured hiding places deep in nearby woods. Then, at the century's end during the 1790s, Sidney Carton's Dover-bound coach founders in the mudslide up towards the brink, its passengers dismounting terrified on the notorious Blood Hill, made hysterically blind to the glaring facade of the Bull Inn, there at the peak for more than 40 years by then. The fictions come, and next the fiction mongers. During 1800, Wordsworth, barely 30, had his cottage overlooking Woolwich Common underneath the hill. And as the villas of the middle classes start to fill the spaces between hilltop mansions in the early 19th century, Algernon Blackwood's future family home and birthplace buds amongst them. The new residents are prisoners in fairyland, commuters waiting for a train of neon roller girls to carry them, Starlight Express, into eternity. They line up at the mounting block, stood knee-deep in a fertile scurf of faltered social visions, different fictions, no less wistful. Shooter's Hill as healing spa or even enclave hilltop town, as site of a colossal pyramid, titanic mausoleum for the nation's Titan dead. The slowly spreading actual homes and streets, unwittingly, invariably, sink foundations deep into a pre-existent dream crust. Steve Moore sleeps on wrinkled bed sheets made of sand beneath Silurian seas. He sleeps a dim encysted mass within the glacier ice, or cradled in the highest boughs of prehistoric forest. Mumbling, he rolls over into servants' quarters in Broom Hall's east wing before the walls dissolve, are realigned into those of the quiet semi he shares with his elder brother, with his goddess, with his books, his work. The closed eyes wearing an absence of spectacles, a hand pressed bloodless, tingling between his knees, and worlds away, the woman next door's hall clock chimes another quarter hour with brisk and brass enthusiasm inappropriate to the drowsing moment. Aging paper perfumes stew and simmer at the threshold of awareness, and the soft trough between lower lip and front teeth silts with curds of mango pulp, its citrus flinch smoothed into a thick equatorial honey, sweet and rounded as a Gogon buttock. Everything he is, his biologic destiny, his father's stroke approaching that eighth hole, blood histories, his code embroidered on the pillow's edge in spittle threads. Back in the 1880s, his paternal great-grandfather is in Dublin, putting down the Fenians. His granddad, born there in the barracks to a mortal term obscure and brief, ended in 1919 with his eldest son, 11-year-old Arthur James, becoming breadwinner. He never takes to Arthur, more a cleared throat than a name, preferring Jim. Hurries to work through Charlton's winter streets, head down, ears aching with the chill and mesmerised by his own schoolboy shoes, their rhythm on the pavement with its suede of frost, unable to believe this is his life. Frederick Burns, the company producing paper size in Belvedere there on the river, just past Plumstead, just past Welling. Panting with the pace, he leaves his breath behind him. Frozen dragon embryos suspended in the dark and biting air. More than a decade later, Jim's still with the same firm when their fit new secretary starts, Winifred Mary Deeks, 9 years his junior, a tidy little bit of posh from the sedate, disputed borderlands where New Cross bleeds to Lewisham. She can't stand Winifred, all wisps and webs and spiders in the wedding cake, sticking with Mary. Delicate and lovely, paper in her blood, with printers somewhere in the background stir, and older brother Francis in naval intelligence, while younger sibling Donald works his way up through the ranks at Foyles, ends up as a distributor of academic publications specialising in the Orient. They're stepping out together before long, and Jim, with his own family tree, all gun cotton and powder burns, hardly believes his luck. They wed in 1937, and start looking for a place to live, somewhere that's safe and self-contained above the grime and hustle, and their eyes drift upward inexorably towards the hilltop, where the sky fast forwards into black and the full moon launches itself in ambush from behind the summit, flies up at the throat of night. They find their Desres in a muted cul-de-sac just opposite the melancholic front of the Memorial Hospital, erected circa 1920 on the site of the old Admiralty Telegraph, where windmill vanes once clacked their urgent semaphore. New house, one of those knocked up in the 30s where Broome Hall had stood. A previous owner bolted after 18 months, no reason given. Jim and Mary take up occupation there in 1938. A perfect fit with the Mrs. Dale's Diary ambience. Peace and quiet. A cousin on the Moore side of the family moved in next door, and forest just across the Dover Road, itself barely a murmur. Future stretched secure before them, and both of an age where all of this could still turn out to be a song, a Ronald Colman film, a musical, Darby and Joan who once were Jack and Jill. The hopes and dreams come with the elevation. Then, within a year, so does the Luftwaffe.